Hi, I'm Harry Lightman, and I'm a licensed psychologist here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. For those of you who are coming back, thank you. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome. And we are here on a mission, if you would. We're all recognizing that there is uncertainty, terrible anxiety within the country. We're not imagining this. It's not naturally going to go away. From my perspective, the most productive course of action, the most logical path out of this mess is to focus on the development of our kids and grandkids. And if we focus on development of our kids, then we necessarily have to focus on the notion of reality. And briefly, in a moment, I'll talk about three different aspects of reality that we deal with on a daily basis. But the reality that we most have to honor is everyday reality, or the granddaddy of all realities, as I call it. And everyday reality is like actually a security blanket, if you would. It layers the entire country, and it's very comforting in that it gives us a sense of purpose and order. And so when we honor everyday reality, it knits us together. And when we don't uphold it and we disrespect it, then it tears us apart. And I think that's what's happening right now. Okay, so let's briefly look at the three levels or types of reality that most of us bump into in the course of everyday living. On the most basic level of reality, we have what's called social compacts, which are just ongoing relationships between two people based on mutual needs. Because of the highly transactional nature of social compacts, this type of reality can endure a lifetime or end in a blink of an eye. Moving on, most of us have some type of involvement in at least one culture each day, and a culture is a group of three or more individuals organized around specific goals and expectations, and those goals and expectations are generated by the leader or leaders of the group or culture. And finally, then we have everyday reality, which is by far the most complex and stable of the realities. And it's stable because of so many elements to it, which are laws and norms and scientific data and rules and accepted practices. And it can be modified, but in much slower pronounced ways than either cultures or certainly social compacts. But in effect, that slowness gives us a sense of stability and predictability and keeps us from being in a reactive and off-balance state. When the three levels of reality are correctly aligned, then we all experience this wonderful sense of stability and equilibrium. It really is a wonderful feeling. And it just doesn't happen in this country. And to illustrate this, look at this contrast between the United States and other countries. And I've given the illustration of a more autocratic country such as Russia. So in the reality of the United States, yes, both culture and social compacts have to be subordinate. But if you notice, there's allowance for both those types of outside of everyday reality as well. And that space outside of everyday reality allows for individuality and creativity and innovation, something that is much cherished in the United States. In contrast, when you look at the reality constructed for Russia, and again, every country has its own reality, the Russian reality has little or no tolerance for individual allowances and differences, but absolutely zero allowance of creativity and differences for culture. So any group inside Russia must be totally loyal to that everyday reality or they're in big trouble. This next slide shows you my conceptualization of why and how we've gotten to such a distressed state and why we all, or most of us, are in the degrees of disequilibrium. And I think that this has been a very gradual process that spans years, not moments, not one administration. And if you look at the top illustration, which is labeled not great at all, it really reflects, again, disequilibrium is occurring because the culture is moving out of the endorsement of everyday reality. And that's where the real pressure I'm guessing is coming from is yes, individuals can be way off the reservation, but it's so many different group cultures now are competing with each other and antagonistic to everyday reality, where then we're in big trouble as listed below, where a culture might just tangentially be engaged with everyday reality, and that might be out of self-interest. Um, but it's more out than in. And then you can see that social compact there is really those two, they might be pals, but they really are outlaws. So we are not in a situation that has been instantaneously created. It's been a long time coming, and we need to take it on. And I think we can. And again, but it has to go back to restoring our regard for everyday reality. We have to insist on it. Now, let's use a case that I was actually involved with to demonstrate the essential value of upholding reality, which it both helps but also then minimize injury or hurt or harm. And the case I'm referencing is tied to the notion of facilitate communication. And facilitate communication was a movement that came out of Australia in 1990. And it was seen as a godsend to individuals with moderate or severe autism who had the inability to communicate previously. And facilitated communication was literally a lightning in the bottle for these types of individuals because it operated on the premise that anyone can communicate and communicate well, or most everyone, provided that the effects of apraxia, which would be a motor or um, verbal weakness, language weakness, was offset. And the way that facilitate communication offset that limitation was simply a skilled facilitator, adult, grabbing the arm, elbow, a wrist, or hand of the person, and then in fact completing the communication loop, which then would allow the person to communicate either using a letterboard, electronic keyboard, or often just having the person write a response on a chalkboard or blackboard. Understandably, such a remarkable intervention brought its share of skeptics to the fore, and understandably so. You may or may not be aware, but the um, community of autistic families with autistic individuals has not been treated well in this country at all, from the consideration of eugenics as a solution for dealing with autism to Bruno Bettelheim's unfounded and actually quite cruel assertion of the refrigerator mom being the cause of autism, and refrigerator mom being the remote and detached mother, which of course is total nonsense. But this community has been victimized over and over again. And so while facilitate communication was eagerly accepted, there were more than its share of skeptics. In addition to the skepticism that facilitated communication stirred, there had also been an alarming pattern emerging where facilitated communication was used to make allegations of sexual abuse in at least 9 states, uh, one of them being the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. In describing this case going forward, I purposely have changed names or withheld names, with one notable exception, which will become obvious shortly. In any event, the autistic child involved, I'm now calling Deborah, it was at that time a 16-year-old adolescent who was in a residential program for autistic kids here in the Commonwealth, highly regarded program then and now. And I'm calling this program Chandler Buys School. And her facilitated communicator, I'm now calling Allie. And Allie had been part of a process in which Deborah had made an accusation regarding her mother being Lonnie. Lonnie's boyfriend had been charged with sexually taking advantage of Deborah while Deborah was visiting home. This allegation had been supported by the then Department of Social Service, which meant two terrible things for this family. One was the man involved could not be in the same home whenever Deborah visited. And more importantly, he was now entered on the registry of sexual offenders in the Commonwealth. So, terrible outcome, not believed and not accepted by the mother, Lonnie, who retained legal representation to contest the findings. Enter Dr. Howard Shane, a highly regarded member of Children's Hospital here in Boston. Most specifically, Dr. Shane was and still is involved in the Development Disabilities Clinic. His interest has always been on communicative disorders and developing alternative means for communication for people who cannot because of disability. So back in 1993, Dr. Shane had been retained. Dr. Shane had correctly focused on authorship, who is saying what, as a way of determining the validity of facilitated communication. And he ran Deborah and Allie through a whole series of exercises. But one in particular struck me as irrefutable evidence regarding authorship. And it proved beyond a doubt, certainly to me and to everyone else who was observing this process, because there were a number of observers in the room with Dr. Shane, Deborah, and Allie as this was all being evaluated. Um, but it was a very skillfully presentation of pictures. And let me first show you how it was done content-wise, and then I'll try to imitate Dr. Shane process-wise. So content-wise, remember, in facilitate communication, the child, in this case Deborah, is linked to the person through physical contact, and that then the facilitator becomes a conduit, if you would, and is able to express the thoughts that, in this case, Deborah is actually having. So, in terms of determining authorship, Dr. Shane came up with what I felt to be a very ingenious but fair methodology. So, to show you in terms of content, this is what he did. He would first show Deborah a picture, okay, and then as he moved to what Allie thought would be just her seeing the same picture, he very skillfully dropped down a different picture so Allie would be not seeing the ice cream cone as illustrated here, but the dog. And then she would be asked to write on the board through her facilitation what Deborah had seen. Okay, so again, the authorship would be determined if Deborah was actually seeing the ice cream cone, and then Ali would be seeing the dog. The authorship of Deborah would be facilitated response would be ice cream cone. And the way this was done process wise is okay, I'm doing a pathetic imitation of Dr. Shane's wonderfully skillful presentation. He would first show the picture, in this case, the illustration ice cream cone, to Deborah, and then as he turned to what Ali thought to be just the same picture, he would show her a totally different picture. And as you see in the slide, the facilitated communication response never was that of what um, Deborah had seen. Rather, every single facilitated communication response was the picture that Ali, the facilitator, had seen. Given the importance of Dr. Shane's findings, but at the same time, the terribly important sexual abuse accusation leveled by Deborah through facilitate communication, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts asked me to come in effect, to check the math, which I did primarily by looking at the 4 hours of film of the evaluation conducted at the Chandler By School. So the good news is that the gentleman who was accused of sexual abuse was cleared and his name removed from the sex offender registry in the Commonwealth. Um, but the bad news is, and I've talked to Dr. Shane recently, that I guess facilitated communication is still roaming around. So that's very unfortunate. So in any event, please, if you're interested in Dr. Shane's work and very compelling uh, documentary on facilitate communication, please go to YouTube. They still have it up. It's the frontline presentation called Prisoners of Silence that was done, came out originally in October 1993. And those of you interested in a very thorough appreciation of autism in this country, please read the Donovan and Zucker book called The Story of Autism uh, in a Different Key. Just a wonderfully researched and written book. So again, thank you for your attention and time. Take care of the families. We're trying to get to a better place.